breeze had picked up. The moon high in the sky and the little fire on the beach was blessedly warm. The older gentleman spoke softly, a gentle lilt to his voice as he retraced the history of Fire Island and the Fire Island Lighthouse. There seems to be some disagreement about how Fire Island came by its name. There's one camp that claims it's Dutch. The Dutch were about the first people in this area, you know. When they came here, they found for inlets where they could bring in their boats, and the Dutch name for Veer. Have you ever seen any of the old maps? Queer things indeed. Hard to read, and of course it made no sense to the average Englishman who came later. It's thought that when they read Veer, they mistook it for fire, and so it became Fire Island. And then there's others who claim it's from the wreckers, who were pirates and all but name only. They would set a fire on the lee side of the island and merchant ships would head for that light, particularly in a storm, thinking they would find safe harbor. Instead, they would run aground and come apart here on the island. Get to the part about the ghost grandpa, a small voice said from the other side of the fire ring. 3 little heads were barely visible, huddled close together, only their eyes shining from the firelight in the darkness. Behind them the Atlantic was bluish gray, the white caps of the surf flickering and disappearing as they crashed up on the beach. Just keep your britches on, we'll get to that, he said with just a trace of irritation. The old fellow knew his business. A ghost story is by nature short, as is an encounter with a ghost. Seeing a ghost can be like the flicker of a candle, just a shifting of shapes in the light, and it is gone before you can even speak the word. A ghost story therefore by nature would be fed to the listener like letting out the line from a rod and reel, waiting for the listener to take the bait. First people to live on the island came here in 1653 when a fellow, he glanced over at Miss Bronwyn and me, Isaac Stratford, fellow out of Babylon if memory serves me correct, built a whaling station and called it by the name of Whalehouse Point. Old man Stratford and his boys would haul boats across Fire Island, from the lee side over here to the beach. They built towers up there on the dunes and would scan the horizon during the day. Well, sooner or later there'd be a spout of water coming out of Whale, and old man Stratford would shout out Whale off, and they'd all haul ours into the boats, and off they'd go. Harpoons, rope, the whole 9 yards, because there was good money to be had in those days from whales. They learned the technique from the Indians of the area, but it was the white men who turned it into commerce. So they'd load the great fish up with harpoons, and attached to these harpoons were what was called a drogue. A drogue is a barrel or a sealskin which has been inflated and then sealed off. And once you got the harpoons in it, the whale would tire itself out trying to submerge and stay down. Eventually the boys could pull up beside it and spear it to death. Then they'd haul it up to the beach, all blood soaked and smeared with blubber, and pull out the knives and the saws and get to work. The oil lit their lanterns, and of course they could turn it into a bit of coin. The bones went into combs and such colors that the men were wearing at the time. Umbrellas, and later on, hoops for women's dresses. Now by about the 1800s there weren't any more whales close to. or so the story goes. And for a while, work stopped on the lighthouse for winter. And you see, the keeper and his family was living in what wasn't too much more than a wooden shack out here in the dunes. And the wind gets hard in the winter, the temperature dropped, and the little girl got sick. They sent for the doctor, but out there they were pretty much isolated. There weren't any bridges back then, and the only way across was by boat, which you couldn't do if the bay was frozen over. In that case, you had to wait till the temperature dropped a bit more and the ice was safe to cross. Whatever the reason, it was at least 3 days before the doctor showed up. And by then there wasn't anything he could do for the little girl. And the next day she gave up the ghost. So this was pretty much it for the little family. The mother went back to Sayville to bury the girl and never came back. The keeper stayed on here. He had to keep the fires burning, you see. And after a while, he finally realized his wife wasn't coming back. So anyway, the new lighthouse gets built. The story gets lost right about here. Some say the keeper stayed on and died there in the keeper's quarters. And now and then people still see him wandering about in there, a shadowy figure in the night, pacing the floors, waiting for the doctor to save his little lady. Others say he finally went mad. It wasn't till the people on the shore noticed that the light had gone out and came over to investigate that they found him hanging inside the new lighthouse up there from the trapdoor on the top. Driven mad from grief and loneliness, some say that wasn't the same keeper, but a later one who hung himself, and others say it was an earlier one, and that he hung himself in the old lighthouse, not the new one at all. The folks that work in the lighthouse now, they're in the gift shop, say they hear doors slamming, but no one else is there. Footsteps climbing the tower, crazy laughing, as the old keeper climbs the steps, rope in hand, looking for a place to tie it off so he can do his last lonely dance. Some of them say there ain't no ghosts at all in there, that they are all just stories which somebody made up to sell a book. But true or not, that's the story. It had grown late and I noticed Miss Bronwyn yawning, and so we got up, said our goodbyes, and started back down the beach. So do you buy any of it? She asked. The hauntings, I mean. Well, I climbed to the top of it myself, you know. She looked at me, her eyebrow arching skeptically. You, whose knees shake when you climb a step ladder. That be me, and okay, so I don't like heights. But I figure if I put myself up against enough of them, eventually I'll get over it. Anyway, I climbed up there. It's an ungodly climb, I might add. I know I'm off, so I go out to take some photos. Get on the catwalk before it strikes me. Oh, that's right, I'm petrified of heights. So I'm plastered against the wall of the thing, keeping at least one hand with a death grip on anything that feels solid at all times. Figure I've had enough and going to talk to her. I ask her if there are any ghosts here, and she tells me pretty much the same story as the old fellow back there. So is it possible? Sure doubt, why not? She looked at me again, the eyebrows still arched. Actually, I can believe the idea that it has haunted more than I can believe you climbed to the top without either money being involved or a gun stuck between your ribs. I sniffed indignantly and looked out to sea. In the darkness, the light of a ship flickered in the darkness, and I thought of the history of the place. There were the rum runners in the 20th century, hundreds of thousands of immigrants whose first sight of America was the light of Fire Island Lighthouse as beacon from far out to sea. With a bit of pride I walked on down the beach, satisfied that I had climbed to the top of a piece of history.